All right, my presentation, Rebooting Your Self-Confidence. I've talked several times about self-esteem, esteem. I'm going to talk about them again. In my experience with the school, with my work with alcoholic relationships, my work with people in general, the area of self-esteem you just can't quite cover enough. It's an area that, it's like on the one hand, we know that we should have a good, healthy self-esteem, and then on the other hand, it's like there's always something to feel bad about yourself over. You know, it's almost like a mental understanding versus an emotional swaying. It seems that emotional part gets us back because we end up doing one thing which pretty much kills our self-esteem often, and that's comparing ourselves with other people, right? Pretty much is. Now, self-confidence, let me just differentiate between the two. Self-confidence is perhaps in a broader sense, it certainly involves self-esteem. If you don't have a good, healthy self-esteem, you're probably not going to have the self-confidence that you want. But self-confidence and self-esteem are not necessarily the same thing. For example, I might be very skilled in my secular job. I can do it well. I've done it for years. I know what I'm doing, and I know that I know what I'm doing. So I'm very confident in my job. I know what I'm doing. But at the same time, I could think, wow, I'm just no good. I don't measure up. People have it, you know, people are better than me, whatever. So you can be confident and yet still suffer from a lack of self-acceptance, which is part of our life leadership paragon. It's the very first one, self-acceptance, which is self-esteem. So self-confidence is when you're confident in your abilities to do something specific, but self-esteem governs everything. Self-confidence or self-acceptance is pretty much how you feel about yourself. And you may know of Jack Canfield, who was the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, among many other things. He once wrote that you'll never rise above the level of your self-esteem. And it's true. Most people struggle with self-acceptance, and often, if not always, it comes from childhood stuff, right? The baggage we bring into adulthood from childhood. And it almost doesn't matter so much what you went through in your childhood. I mean, you can almost have a pristine childhood, and a lot of people will bring that with them in some way. And it's a result of perhaps being at school. You know how difficult it can be at school, where kids can be rather cruel. They can be mean. You wear the wrong designer jeans to school and you're made fun of. If your name rhymes with anything remotely funny, then you get that going on, and they pick on you and so forth. So most people struggle to some degree with self-acceptance, which affects their self-confidence. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, the only time that self-esteem seems to come into play, or lack thereof, low self-esteem, is when we end up comparing ourselves to other people. Think about that just for a moment. Let it slowly simmer. Just think about that. If you don't compare yourself to others, then what happens to your self-esteem? I mean, think about it for a minute. If there's nobody to compare to, then how do you know you're not as good as someone else? You don't have that comparison going on because there's nobody else to compare to, right? So my question tonight, and I'm going to be rather direct in some of this stuff in an effort to shock and awe you. You ready for that? Shocking. That you can say that later. I'll say, how did you feel about that? You'll say, shocking. Right? No? Okay. Now I've lost my train of thought. My blonde hair has nothing to do with that, by the way. Much. All right. If you don't have anybody to compare yourself to, then you don't really usually have much of a self-esteem issue. Problem is, there's a lot of people you could compare yourself to. And why do we do that? Think about that. I mean, look at the media. Look at Hollywood. Look at all the movies. Everybody's compared to an ideal that we think is the ideal, right? So we end up comparing ourselves to this ideal, And we end up with a damaged self-esteem, self-acceptance. It has a lot to do with the way you think about you. And the way you think about you, yourself, is a habit. Change the habit. And those people that you're comparing yourself to, guess what they're doing? Anybody? Comparing themselves to others. Maybe even you. You ever have that happen? Where you think you're just not as good as so-and-so, and you end up having a conversation and they think they're not as good as you. It's like, we begin to see the futility of that kind of stinking thinking. It just doesn't make any sense. So how can you turn that around? Change the way you think about you. I don't care whether you're tall, short, fat, thin, green, blue, black, yellow, whatever. I don't care. Who said that one particular model is the reference point? Who designated that? You mean population, social, the general people out there, they all, oh, wow, you're so this, you're so that. So we begin to think that this person has been designated as the reference point, the role model for what a person should look like or be like, correct? But that's just more them-esteem, isn't it? You all remember the difference between them-esteem and self-esteem. Self-esteem is that you have internal expectations and validation. It's internal. Them-esteem is external expectations and validation. If I have them-esteem, then I only feel good about myself when I'm doing what someone else thinks I'm doing. If I have them-esteem, I only feel good about me when I look like the Hollywood stars, or I am doing something like so-and-so does, or when I do what so-and-so, someone else says. Could be my parents, could be the religion, could be anything. So when we talk about self-esteem and low self-esteem, we don't really use low self-esteem. It doesn't make any sense anymore. Them-esteem does, because low self-esteem is the same thing as them-esteem. So at this point, do this. Scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the highest. Take just a second, and what number are you on the self-esteem scale? 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. You don't have to tell me, just note it. Where are you at? Excuse me. I do that a lot with my counseling, and a lot of times people say 5, halfway. Some people say 6 or 7. That's good. Some people have said even lower. Whatever number you're at, why? Why'd you pick that number? That's for you to answer. It's a rhetorical question. Why'd you pick that number? There's nothing wrong with you. Unless you're guilty of crimes against humanity, and I'm pretty confident that you're not, stop this kind of thinking. There is nothing wrong with anyone here, with anyone watching this. You're perfect just the way you are. And you're perfect in more ways than you can even imagine. Because where you are right here, right now, is based on your own choices. I mean, think about it. We're all together here, right? Every one of us made a decision, a choice to be here, right? I did. You did too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be part of this. We wouldn't be part of this. We are where we are in life because of our choices. If you don't like where you're at in life, change your choices. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be different than the accepted norm. Right? It's okay. Nobody said you had to conform to what's socially acceptable. Obviously, we have to abide by the laws and all that to have a fluid society, right? To get along and to make things work. But you can be yourself too, can't you? You can. And that's what's beautiful about people. Think about this. We talked about assertiveness a week or two ago. And I went over some of the different types of behavior. There's assertive behavior. That means I win, you win, right? There's aggressive behavior. I win, you lose. There's passive-aggressive behavior. I win, you lose, same as aggressive. Then there's passive behavior. I lose, you win. And then there's codependent. I win if you win. Of all of those, there's only one that's really healthy. I win, you win. Win-win situation, correct? Now, if you take each one of those, what are those people who are in those behaviors, what are they focused on? Well, let's start with assertive. I win, you win. What am I focused on? Both of us, right? It's a mutual focus. If I'm aggressive, who am I focused on? Self-focused, right? I win, you lose. Same with passive-aggressive. And what about codependent? I win if you win. And passive, I lose, you win. You almost might think, well, those two kind of fall into I'm focused on the other person, right? But let's take it a step further. If I'm passive, I lose, you win, or if I'm codependent, I win if you win, I'm focused on what you think of me. So what am I focused on? Self-focused. Isn't that interesting? So passive people, codependent people, a lot of them take pride in that. Well, I'm not hurting other people. You're right. You're hurting yourself. You're allowing yourself to be hurt. So people with low self-esteem are self-focused. I only feel good about myself when other people think I'm doing what I should be doing, or what they think I should be doing, to be more accurate. So we don't want to be self-focused. We want to be mutually focused. It should be win-win. It's never good if it's not win-win. That's the only healthy approach to take. So, to reboot or rebuild your self-confidence, what do? I'll start with self-acceptance. Acquire the knowledge that you need to acquire to be confident in who you are. That confidence can be in your job, it can be in anything, but it could also be in just who you are as a person. What knowledge do you need? Maybe you don't need any real, external knowledge at all. Maybe everything you need is right inside you, right here and now. And it is. There's nothing wrong with you. It is okay to be who you are. I mean, that might sound like a simple statement, right? But it's pretty powerful when you think about it, because most of us, when we have poor self-esteem, it's not okay to be us, because we're comparing ourselves to others. But it's okay to be who you are. You are perfect just the way you are. Do you realize the odds of any of us being here are beyond astronomical? Talk about winning the lottery. We all did in a huge way. We're here. And so when we bring our own distinctiveness, our own uniqueness to the table, we're bringing something that nobody else can bring but us. If you weren't here, nobody would ever be able to bring that to the table. Is that not cool? So I don't care what you look like, what you think is wrong with you. It's not. Should we go talk to some actresses and actors who've had all that stuff done because they also didn't like the way they looked? You know the stories, the plastic surgery and all. Act as if. You want to be confident, you want to have good, healthy self-esteem, act as if. Behave as if. Think as if. It's your own personal self-talk that comes into play a lot. We have to be mentally disciplined. We have to discipline ourselves when it comes to the thoughts that we think and the things that we say to each other. Think about the First National Thought Bank of blank. Insert your name here. When you have a negative thought, it's like taking a withdrawal out of your bank account. When you have a positive thought, it's like making a deposit to your bank account. How many people have an overdrafted bank account? Because they constantly say negative things about themselves. You don't have to do that. You just don't have to. And with a nod to Bob Newhart, stop it. That might have been a funny skit, and if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, look it up on YouTube. Bob Newhart, stop it. It's funny. But it's true. Sometimes that's all it takes. We just need to slap ourselves a little bit. Stop it. Stop thinking that way. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Look, I think Pierce Brosnan's probably a good-looking guy. I have a hard time telling whether guys are good-looking, but that's just my thing, right? But I'm pretty sure he is. Probably really good-looking to women, and to probably some men. Will I ever look like him? No. You guys are saying, no, 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 you don't. But I don't care. I don't need to. He'll never look like me. How about that one? Huh? That's right. That's what I'm talking about. Will he, and he's, I'm sure, a nice guy, will he ever do this? Will he ever make this contribution to humanity? Not this one, because that's the only one I can make. I can only make this contribution in the way that I make it. What about you? What contribution are you making that nobody else can make? And what's that worth to you? Is that not worth something? Say yes. Good answer. Just ask me, I'll tell you what to say. Act as if, walk as if, behave as if you have high confidence, high self-esteem, and you will. Some quotes. What you think of me is none of my business. A lot of people have said that. The earliest I can find is Eleanor Roosevelt. What you think of me is none of my business. I said this last week, you know, if you disagree, that's okay. Can people disagree with us? Yes, it's okay. Don't need people to agree with you. Because think about that. When you say something and somebody poo-poos it, oh, I don't like that, I don't think that's true at all, and all of a sudden the spotlight's on you, you're thinking, ooh, maybe I'm not right about that. Don't do that. You have a right to your own perspective without judgment, whatever that perspective is. Now, of course, we urge you to think about things, have a compelling basis for any beliefs you have that are reasonable, but you're still entitled to your perspective, just as I'm entitled to mine, without judgment. People want to judge you. Who's that on? It's on them, isn't it? It's not on us. It's their stuff, not our stuff. Should have brought my ball. I think I've mentioned this before, but I used to do the don't catch the ball little routine, and I'd get an audience member up here, and we'd toss a ball. And whenever somebody tosses you a ball, what do? We catch it. And when we catch it, we take ownership of it. So when somebody says something about us, even to our face behind our back, doesn't really matter. If they disagree with us, if they do something that could potentially damage our self-esteem, it's like tossing that ball. And what do? We catch it. We take ownership of it. And if it's, hurtful or something, sometimes we might just fire it right back at them. What happens if you just let the ball bounce off? Do you have to catch the ball? The answer is no. And there's a huge point behind this. Don't catch the ball. Why not? Because you don't have to. You don't have to. It is not written anywhere that says you've got to catch that ball or take ownership of whatever they think or don't think. Don't catch the ball. What you think of me is none of my business. Another quote I just saw a day or two ago. I don't know who originally said it. It's unknown, but they made the point that you're a ghost driving a meat-coated skeleton made from stardust. What do you have to be scared of? Kind of puts it in perspective. Excuse me. And my late father came up with a brilliant quote that I didn't know about until I was going through his papers after he had passed back in '02. And he wrote this. He said, "We ought not stand in the shadow of our worst moments." We ought not stand in the shadow of our worst moments. You know what happens, folks? It takes so much energy, so many emotional resources to constantly kick ourselves, to denigrate ourselves, to constantly have that stuff going on. We're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not educated enough. And at some point in our life, we have to just release it. We've got to let it go. Because it takes too much energy. We could channel that energy into other more positive ways. Build yourself up. There's nothing that you have to be ashamed of. Nothing, no shame, no guilt. Make your mistakes, embrace them, learn the lesson, move forward, understanding that nobody gets a no mistake pass, right? Everybody makes mistakes. And there are times when we all do it wonderfully. We'll put our foot in our mouth. We'll say the wrong thing. We didn't mean it to come out that way. Or we do something. We blunder. We don't know why. It happens to everybody. There is nobody exempt, not even those people who are ridiculing you for making a mistake. Just understand that they got to put their socks on the same way too. So, accept who you are for the unique person that you are, for the unique gift that you are to this table. You bringing that to the table. The ultimate foundation here is do no harm, do right. Don't harm your self-esteem either by thinking crappy thoughts. Remember the First National Thought Bank of, insert your name. Anytime you think a negative thought, it's like making a withdrawal from your bank account. And if you're overdrawn, then we have a problem. That means you've got to make some positive comments about yourself to get your bank, your balance up and over in the positive side. So when it comes to self-confidence, just make the decision to stop thinking poorly of yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. And we often come to this point sometimes too late in life, and that's not good. Doesn't matter. Bring your uniqueness, your own inner beauty out, and deliver greatness to the world. Every one of us can do that. Deliver your greatness to the world, and don't get bogged down with the negative self-talk, the negative thoughts, and so forth. We ought not stand in the shadow of our worst moments. Why not live in the sunshine of your best moments? Focus on that. You make a mistake, fine. Learn a lesson, make amends if necessary. Move on, guilt-free. Just be you. And be happy that you're here. And just stop thinking poorly about yourself. I hope some of these points have helped.